So welcome to our first iteration of Lunchtime Live. This is a new initiative that we're trying here where we have more informal conversations with faith leaders on a variety of different topics. And today I am joined by David Balto and by Sister Laura Lee, both of whom work in hospital chaplaincy. And so we're going to be talking with them. I'm going to be talking with them about
You just went out. See me? You're completely okay.
You lost her.
Yeah, I don't see her.
That was a great time for me to straighten out my office.
Ah! David, get back over here. Behave yourself.
I'm just noticing how much more organized you are than me.
Ah! Well, this part of the house. I'm not sure if we're online. We might be online, so.
No, we're on. Oh, we might be on live right now. Yeah, it could be.
Okay. Here we go. Ooh.
See me, we can't hear you.
hi, can you hear me now?
Now
Yes.
I can hear you. Yes.
Sorry, I got kicked off. So
Okay.
I'm back on now. Yes. So anyway, as I was saying, we are going to get started. If you have questions that you want to ask and you're watching this on YouTube, then just go ahead and put them in the chat function and we will get to them during the course of the conversation. So welcome to you both and welcome to anyone else who may be tuning in. So I wanted to get started by asking you to just reflect a little bit about our current situation. Of course, when we first talked about this conversation, we were going to focus primarily on the pandemic, but there have been other things that I think all of us are deeply involved in, are thinking about deeply. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to reflect a little bit on that before launching into our broader conversation.
Thank you. I think it's very appropriate that you ask about that at this moment. And I think it's appropriate in connection with the group we are visiting with today, because I think a lot of what's happening is just exactly the issue of understanding one another from different faiths, cultures, races, etc. So for myself, I think it's a good thing to put the elephant in the room there, open that up and just realize that the efforts we are making today are toward mutual understanding. And I would talk about nonviolence as well and the importance of nonviolence. I heard on the TV, I don't remember who it was who said this, but we're not a show of force, but we're a sign of presence. And I thought that was an excellent expression of what I hope that our law enforcement and our military and the people who are trying to help keep peace in our cities are doing. They are not a sign of force as much as a sign of presence.
Both Laura Lee and I are blessed to work in a remarkable place, Washington Hospital Center, which is a wonderful example of the racial diversity of the city, with a largely African-American staff and a largely African-American patient population. It's a setting where we see every day people not noticing race or religion and passing through those differences. I hope that everything I've learned and ways I've been touched by working there give me skills so that I can use them to help other people bridge the divisions that are so chronic and so painful in our society today.
Mhm.
Thank you. So could you both talk a little bit about, you've both referenced your work. Can you talk a little bit about how you got started in hospital chaplaincy and kind of what brought you to that?
So I've been a chaplain for about 6 years, a little more than 4 years at the hospital. I wanted to go to the hospital because I wanted to be, my initial chaplaincy was in a Jewish nursing home. I wanted to have a more diverse environment, to challenge myself, especially to learn how to go beyond barriers, learn other people's religious stories, and help myself and others grow spiritually and feel closer to God. A hospital is an incredibly intense place, and it's a really fabulous place to try to use your spiritual skills to bring people comfort in very difficult circumstances. Laura Lee?
I am a Catholic sister. Since I was a child, I felt a calling from God to give my life in this way. And I grew up in a very small town in Idaho, 860 people population. And although there were religious communities around where I grew up, I felt a calling to become a part of something broader and something in which I could join people and live with them the difficulties of life as a contemplative person, as a person who prayed in those circumstances. And as a result of that, I did find the Little Sisters of Jesus, which is an international group, which is founded for that purpose. So having that basis of being rooted as a religious for many, many years, and being rooted in an international community where we come from very different races, cultures, and ways of thinking, all 5 continents, I felt the calling to reach out as a hospital chaplain. I met one of the hospital chaplains at my work, and we do manual work, and I was doing manual work at the Panera at the hospital center. And it is through one of the chaplains at the hospital center that I asked about chaplaincy and was accepted into the program. And it was a great gift to me to discover the spiritual discoveries of so many people who I've come to know and appreciate within the Washington Hospital Center community. That includes the staff and those that I contact as a chaplain in the hospital. Do you hear her, David? Sorry, can't hear you.
Sorry. Somehow the internet went out again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat a little bit of what you were saying. You were talking about that you're part of an international
Catholic religious community, is that?
Yes, yes, and then I kind of lost you after that.
Oh. Well, I've lived in many different places. I've lived in an African American neighborhood in Chicago. I've traveled with circus people. I have lived in Alaska as a Costco sampler. Um, my way of life as a Catholic sister is a little unusual. But in all of those interactions with people, the main interest is to make family, to connect with others and make unity. That's the real purpose of what we do, without trying to convert or trying to change someone into something they're not, but to appreciate that person as they are and who they are. And I could give numerous examples of how that happens. But for me, I guess all of that life experience, it seems only natural that my life, when I became interested in chaplaincy at the Washington Hospital Center, through working at Panera, actually, and meeting the staff and the patients that would come to the hospital, to Panera to eat. The supervisor of CBE invited me to join the program and expressed that what my lifestyle has been all this time is basically a simple, informal way of living chaplaincy. So it seemed like a normal transition for me, and a very joyful one. And I feel very fulfilled in doing what I am doing now.
Can you talk a little bit about what is chaplaincy when you're working with patients in the hospital? What does that look like normally? And then how has that changed since the pandemic?
David?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So normally we wait, we're assigned to units. We'll go visit the units and find patients who, need a visit. And we'll sit down with them and just be in their place, just be a presence for them. We have no agenda. They sort of set the agenda for us. And we help to, them to talk about what's going on inside them, how their spirit is doing. If the person just wants conversation, that's fine. If they want prayer, we help them with that. But we're just sort of like helping them deal with the struggle that's going on inside, and helping them if they feel it, to feel closer and more connected with the Lord. And the family is part of that too, and we do those services for the family. Under the challenges of COVID, the problems are very substantial. First of all, for COVID patients, we can't be physically present at all. And so we have to figure out other means, through phone or by computer screen, to try to communicate with them. But those, and the families aren't present, and that's a profound difference. Because a lot of the work we do is by working with the family and the patient together to help them grapple with the issues they're facing. Laura Lee?
Yes, I think you expressed it very well. For myself, chaplaincy is, first of all, helping an individual to acknowledge who they are and what their relationship with whatever spiritual person or being or is for them. So for me, it's very important when I come into a room of a patient, for example, is to just allow them to feel comfortable in my presence and free to express who they are already. I think a lot of times we think that chaplains are meant to come into an environment and bring the presence of God into that environment. And I would say it's also, and very importantly so, to recognize and acknowledge the presence or the spiritual sense that is already there within the person. And if I can do that, I'm going to leave that room, but they are still there with whatever it is they are working with. And so if they can find that inner light within themselves, they can continue that journey of transformation, spiritual or emotional, physical healing. Perhaps they need reconciliation from their family members. If they are close to death, things may be troubling them that they need to resolve before they pass on. And if I can be a little touch of that gentleness, receptivity, and a calm, non-anxious presence in that person's midst, then I can help them perhaps to allow that to come to the surface and find resolution, or at least work on the journey.
You know, and Laura Lee hit the key phrase, which is calm, non-anxious presence. And nowadays, that is really challenging when the hospital feels intensely different than it normally feels because there are no visitors, because the situations are far more critical. So it's very, very challenging.
Yes. I have found, if you'd like an example, I
Yes,
can give you an example. The other day I was at the hospital and I was called to a code blue. And it ended up being a patient, male patient who had COVID, who was having a heart attack, and all the people came rushing in for code blue. And I noticed that there was a woman in the room with him, which is very unusual for someone with COVID. As I was there, a presence in the hallway with the staff. Sometimes just them knowing I'm there helps them and gives them a sense of that someone is here just to be here and to pray and to be a presence. And as I was waiting to see what would transpire, I found out that the woman in the room was the wife of the man who was having the code blue. And they had both had code blue. Excuse me, the virus. And so they said, let's move her down the hallway. And they moved her down the hallway. And they asked me to go into the room and to be with her, to support her, as all of this excitement was going on in the other room. So I think it's also a question of, like David was saying, and I was saying about calm, anxious presence, and also just being there as a sign, it's okay. You know, you are supported by something other than yourself and someone other than yourself. And she was quite grateful just to have that support during that time.
Yeah. As you were talking, it also brought up another question, and that is, of course, we think a lot about working with the patients. Do you also work with the medical staff? Is that something that they reach out to you? And especially, again, during this time when I can imagine they're under even greater stress and uncertainty.
Well, yeah, I mean, the staff, which is used to, we all live with a fundamental, this very strong desire that people not die alone. And the staff, because the relatives can, oftentimes cannot be there, there is a protocol for the relatives to be there once they know that life support is going to be removed and the person's going to die relatively soon. The staff goes through a lot of anguish. And so we're there available for the staff. And we have, and during the course of the year, we have different opportunities to go and meet with the staff and connect with them spiritually, such as an annual blessing of the hands.
Oh, may I interject there? Yeah. Because David and I happened to do that together at the hospital. And it was quite moving, I felt. No, David, that we went together to the unit. And it was quite touching to see how so many of the staff just wanted their hands blessed. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. By the way, I should have mentioned early on, I'm Jewish, and the fact Laura Lee and I work so wonderfully together is the the hospital is special and how chaplaincy is special. We easily treat each other's, we treat everybody just the same way with a loving spiritual presence.
And I've been invited by the imam, the Muslim chaplain at the hospital, the same kind of experience, which is so touching, invited me to come and pray with the patient with him. And those signs of unity and connection with one another is a revelation to the people that we go to as well, and the staff.
Are there any challenges that brings about when a chaplain of one faith goes to a patient of a different faith, or are they pretty much welcoming and accepting of anybody who wants to come and be with them?
Go ahead, David.
I think most of the time not, but I will. I'm Jewish and I wear a yarmulke, ritual header covering. Most people observe I'm Jewish. Maybe once or twice in 4 years, somebody is deferred from having me help them. I just think you need to have an open ear, especially when you're going to do something ritually. So if I'm ever with a Muslim patient, I will just be cautious and always make sure, is it appropriate for me to pray in this fashion or that fashion, or a Christian patient. So
I think familiarity with other faith traditions is important, so that we do not offend or step on toes, because we have to respect. It's really a question of respecting the faith tradition of that person. And sometimes we will ask, could you tell me your faith tradition? And hopefully, if we know that, we can join them in whatever they need. I was speaking with you before about ritual, which is very important to people. I think I've noticed that since I've been working in the hospital. It's very important to people to do ritual. It can be as simple as holding hands. It can be, I want to be blessed with holy water. It can be, I want an anointing with oil. It can be, I want to receive bread and wine. You could go on and on about the symbolisms and rituals that people find that are comforting to them, because it's something they've lived with their whole lives. So how do we relate to that as well as possible, and at the same time remain faithful to our own faith tradition without, that's a very challenging part of being a chaplain, I think. But it's very enriching as well. Wouldn't you say so, David?
Absolutely. And so I may be called in close to death and of a Catholic patient. They may want the sacrament to the sick. I'll explain I'm not a priest. Hopefully we have one available, but if we didn't, I would say here, and there are prayers to say, I can't give you the sacrament of the sick, but let me go and, is it okay if I say this other following prayer? And, that's almost always satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I was wanting to ask, so you were talking about kind of how you work with patients of other faiths. And I was just wondering if through this process, and Laura Lee, I think you talked about this a little bit, through that process, do you find how does it affect your own faith? Do you find your own faith is strengthened through working with people of other faiths? I hear that often in an interfaith context, that they feel that their own faith, people's own faiths are strengthened, or they find new aspects to their faith that they hadn't considered before. Do you find that in your work at all?
So, I don't want to generalize about anybody, but typically Jewish people don't talk about God very much. We pray to God, but we don't talk about them. African Americans talk about, generalizing again, talk about God a lot. And you can't really engage in an interaction without talking about God with, lots of African American patients. And it certainly has, sort of like reawakened to me that, there's somebody upstairs who actually wants to be in dialogue with me. So I've learned a tremendous amount. Laura Lee?
Hmm. I have discovered, as I was sharing earlier, so much since I've been a chaplain in the hospital, the presence of, it can be offensive to say God, with Jewish people, but God, the spiritual being, the presence of that within the people that I meet. And I would like to share a very short example. I went to the psych unit yesterday. I happened to be on call yesterday. And I was called to a patient who asked to see the chaplain. And I went in there and I observed community, because this woman who wanted to talk to the chaplain started inviting other people to join her. And pretty soon we were a little group sitting around in a meeting room. And I didn't quite know what they wanted, but they just wanted to be there. So we shared together. And at the end, I offered a prayer with them. And they were so touched. The young man, there was a young man there, African-American man in his 20s, no, he wasn't African-American, he was from Nigeria. But he got up and he blessed me. And I was so touched, because he felt the presence of the eternal being within him enough to bless me. And it taught me a lesson. If we allow others to allow that spiritual side of them to come out, they want to share their faith with others.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to my last question, and that is, what is giving you some moments of joy or some moments of hope right now in your work?
David? Well, I was going to share that experience actually of this young man, because I think I've discovered more and more, most people have a spiritual side to them. And sometimes we don't see that when we're walking down the street, or we see individuals and we just see the outside of the person and we don't see the inside of that person. But I think there are many, many people that are really spiritual and seeking a deep spirituality in their lives. And so that's been very enlightening for me and a great gift.
And I think the example I have is there's a COVID patient in our synagogue who unfortunately passed away. But before that, I organized prayer groups like for 3 consecutive nights where we read Psalms. And on one day we read the entire book of Psalms together, which was a great way of bringing the community together and having a sense that our prayers hopefully would bring wholeness to his spirit, and then, he did pass away. So, but bringing community together was really rewarding.
And if I may, I would just want to say too about, we haven't talked at all about approaching death. And I think that for me, as I have worked with people who are on their passage, are making their passage of dying, it has given me a lot of comfort to know that it is, Americans tend to be so uncomfortable with death, but the process of death can be a beautiful transformation of that person's heart, soul, mind, being, to come to the essential of what life really is. And so I've been very touched and moved by my experiences being with people who are on that passage.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me in this conversation. I know we
Thank
just
you
barely
so much.
scratched the surface,
Yes,
Thank you.
but I hope maybe this will be the, kind of jumping off point for more deeper, longer conversations. But thank you again so much. And for you who are watching, we will be, this conversation was recorded and we'll be posting it online on our social media. So if you weren't able to stay for the whole thing, you can check out the full conversation there. Thank you again both so much.
thank you so much, Stephen,
Thank
for
you.
inviting us.
Bye.
Thank you.
It's a real honor.
Thank you. Thank you.